Every thought you've ever had was built, not by chance, but by the invisible wiring of your brain. And every thought you will have tomorrow can be built too, deliberately, intentionally, and with purpose. What if I told you that you are not just a passenger in your mind, but the architect of it? Thoughts are not abstract clouds drifting through your mind. They are built through physical changes in the structure and chemistry of the brain. This ability of the brain to change itself is known as neuroplasticity. It is one of the most important discoveries in neuroscience because it overturns the old belief that the brain becomes fixed after a certain age. Neuroplasticity means that the brain is constantly adapting, reorganizing, and forming new connections in response to what you experience, think, and do. Every time you learn something new, practice a skill, or repeat a certain thought pattern, you are strengthening specific neural circuits. The more often those circuits are activated, the stronger and more efficient they become, just like muscles responding to repeated use. Neuroplasticity operates through two main processes: the formation of new synapses and the strengthening or weakening of existing ones. When neurons fire together repeatedly, they form stronger connections, a principle known as Hebbian learning. This is where the saying, "neurons that fire together wire together," comes from. When you think a thought over and over, the neural pathway associated with that thought becomes more dominant and automatic. This is how habits, beliefs, and mental patterns are formed, not by chance, but by consistent activation and reinforcement over time. The architecture of thought is therefore a reflection of your experiences and attention. Every sensory input, emotional reaction, and internal dialogue contributes to shaping your neural landscape. For example, if you frequently focus on negative outcomes, the neural circuits related to worry and fear become more pronounced. On the other hand, if you deliberately practice gratitude or problem solving, the circuits related to optimism and resilience strengthen. Your brain doesn't distinguish between what is real and what is vividly imagined. It simply responds to patterns of activation. That means the thoughts you choose to entertain directly sculpt your brain's wiring. This process isn't instantaneous. The formation of new neural connections and the pruning of old ones occur gradually. It depends on repetition, focus, and emotional intensity. The neurotransmitters involved, such as dopamine, acetylcholine, and serotonin, play roles in marking certain experiences as important, helping the brain decide which pathways to reinforce. Dopamine, for instance, signals that something is valuable or rewarding, which increases the likelihood that you'll remember it and repeat the behavior that caused it. Over time, consistent activation under the right emotional and attentional conditions leads to durable structural change. Understanding this principle gives context to why deliberate mental training, mindfulness, visualization, learning, and even therapy can be so powerful. Each of these activities uses neuroplasticity to reshape the mind. They direct attention, create meaningful emotional engagement, and repeat new patterns until they become ingrained. The same mechanism that once built automatic negative thinking can, with intention, build calm confidence and focus. Thoughts are therefore not fixed traits or unchangeable aspects of identity. They are dynamic constructions continually influenced by how you use your brain each day. Repetition and emotion are the two main forces that shape thought patterns, acting as the fundamental drivers of how neural connections in the brain strengthen or weaken over time. The brain learns through repeated activation, and the emotional weight attached to an experience determines how deeply it becomes embedded in memory and thought. When you repeat a certain way of thinking, speaking, or reacting, you are essentially training your brain to follow that same path more easily in the future. Just as physical exercise strengthens muscles, mental repetition strengthens neural circuits. Each time a particular thought or behavior is practiced, the neurons involved in that process fire together, reinforcing their connection. Over time, those connections become the brain's default routes, shaping not only how you think, but also how you perceive the world and respond to it. Repetition is the reason habits form, both useful and harmful ones. The brain prefers efficiency, and repetition creates efficiency by reducing the amount of energy required to perform a thought or behavior. A well-rehearsed mental pattern becomes automatic because the neural pathway associated with it is so well established. This is why changing an old thought pattern feels difficult at first. It requires the creation of a new neural pathway and the gradual weakening of the old one. Consistent repetition of a new way of thinking or responding tells the brain, "This is important, keep this." Without repetition, the brain simply does not retain or prioritize new information, as unused circuits eventually weaken through a process called synaptic pruning. Emotion acts as the amplifier for this process. While repetition lays down the track, emotion adds the power that locks it in place. Emotional intensity signals to the brain that something is significant and must be remembered. This happens through the release of neurochemicals such as norepinephrine and dopamine, which tag experiences as meaningful. Positive emotions like excitement, gratitude, or curiosity encourage the brain to reinforce certain thoughts, while negative emotions like fear or shame can strengthen others. This is why emotionally charged experiences, whether pleasant or painful, are often remembered vividly and can influence thinking patterns for years. The brain's emotional centers, especially the amygdala, communicate directly with the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, guiding which memories and thoughts receive the most attention and which ones fade into the background. When repetition and emotion interact, they create the most powerful form of learning and habit formation. Repeated thoughts that carry emotional charge, such as a belief about one's worth or ability, become deeply ingrained and begin to shape identity itself. The mind doesn't distinguish between a repeated external message and an internal one. Both are wired into the same neural architecture through the same biological mechanisms. Understanding this dynamic reveals why intentional repetition of positive, emotionally grounded thoughts can gradually replace limiting or negative ones, redirecting the brain circuitry toward more constructive patterns of perception and behavior. Your thoughts, emotions, and body exist in a continuous, dynamic feedback loop, constantly influencing and shaping one another in ways that are both subtle and profound. The brain does not operate in isolation. It is deeply intertwined with the physiological state of your body, and the signals it receives from your body directly affect your mental processes. Every heartbeat, every breath, every tension in a muscle sends information to the brain, which interprets these signals and integrates them into the current mental state. For instance, when your heart rate accelerates, your brain often interprets this as a signal of alertness or stress, which can lead to anxious thoughts. Conversely, a slowed, calm heartbeat communicates safety and relaxation, which can foster more positive or reflective thinking. The body and brain are constantly exchanging information, creating loops where thoughts can influence physiology and physiology can influence thoughts in return. Emotions play a central role in this feedback loop. They are not just subjective experiences, they are neurochemical and physiological events that impact the brain and body simultaneously. When you feel fear, for example, your body releases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, which increase heart rate, blood pressure, and respiration. These changes in turn affect the neural circuits in your brain, priming you to think in ways that are consistent with fear, scanning for threats, recalling past dangers, or imagining negative outcomes. The brain and body are thus locked in a circular pattern. Your body signals influence your thoughts, and your thoughts reinforce your bodily state. This is why chronic stress or anxiety can feel like it takes over both mind and body. The loop continuously reinforces itself until interrupted. The feedback loop also works in the opposite direction, allowing you to intentionally shape your mental state through physical interventions. Practices such as controlled breathing, posture adjustment, movement, and even facial expressions can influence your thoughts and emotions. Deep, slow breathing, particularly when the exhale is extended, signals to the nervous system that the body is in a state of safety, which dampens the amygdala's activation and allows the prefrontal cortex to regain influence over rational thought. Physical exercise not only alters neurotransmitter levels like serotonin and dopamine, but also provides the brain with signals of energy, capability, and focus, which can shift thought patterns toward productivity, confidence, and clarity. The body is not simply a passive receiver of mental states, it is an active participant in shaping them. Understanding this loop highlights the importance of self-awareness. By monitoring both bodily sensations and thought patterns, you can identify the triggers that drive negative feedback cycles and intervene deliberately. Awareness alone begins to interrupt automatic loops because it engages higher-order cognitive processes that can override reflexive responses. Over time, repeated interventions that combine bodily regulation with conscious mental focus can rewire these feedback loops, strengthening circuits associated with resilience, calm, and adaptive thinking while weakening circuits associated with stress, worry, and rumination. The integration of body, brain, and emotion illustrates that thoughts are not isolated phenomena, but part of a living system, constantly influenced by internal and external signals, and continuously capable of adaptation. Physical state control, such as through breathing, posture, and movement, can directly influence mental state, demonstrating that the body is not merely a vessel for thoughts, but an active participant in shaping them. The nervous system constantly monitors bodily signals, interpreting them as indicators of safety, threat, energy, or fatigue. This constant flow of information allows the brain to adjust cognition and emotion based on physiological conditions. For example, when you experience shallow, rapid breathing, your body signals stress or danger, which the brain interprets through the amygdala, triggering anxious or reactive thoughts. Conversely, when you deliberately slow your breathing, particularly by extending the exhale, the body signals calm, activating the parasympathetic nervous system, which in turn quiets the stress response in the brain and allows more deliberate, rational thinking to emerge. Breathing is one of the most accessible tools for influencing mental state because it is both autonomic and under voluntary control. By consciously adjusting the rate, depth, or rhythm of your breath, you can send immediate feedback to the brain, effectively reshaping thought patterns in real time. For instance, practices like box breathing or coherent breathing create measurable changes in heart rate variability, which the brain interprets as a signal of safety and stability. This simple act can reduce the intensity of negative thought spirals, increase focus, and enhance emotional regulation, demonstrating that physical control provides a direct pathway to modulate cognition and perception. Posture and movement have similar effects. Standing or sitting upright with an open chest communicates alertness and confidence to the brain, influencing neurotransmitter levels and cognitive readiness. Conversely, slouched or contracted postures reinforce feelings of fatigue, low energy, or negativity. Movement through exercise releases endorphins and dopamine, which elevate mood and improve cognitive function. Even small actions like stretching, walking, or intentional gestures create sensory input that interacts with thought processes. These physical cues, though often subtle, shape how the brain interprets the present moment and, in turn, how thoughts unfold. The interplay between physical state and mental state highlights the bidirectional nature of the mind-body relationship. Thoughts influence the body, but the body also provides feedback that can reinforce or reshape thoughts. Chronic tension, poor sleep, or lack of movement can contribute to mental rigidity, rumination, or depressive thinking, while deliberate physical regulation can enhance mental flexibility, creativity, and resilience. This relationship suggests that mental training is most effective when it includes physical awareness and regulation, not just cognitive effort alone. Even simple interventions, when repeated, can produce lasting changes in thought patterns. For example, incorporating daily breathing exercises, mindful movement, or posture adjustments primes the nervous system to interpret physiological states as safe, calm, and energized. Over time, the brain learns to associate these bodily states with more positive, adaptive thought patterns, gradually reshaping neural circuits. By recognizing that your physical state is not separate from your thoughts, but is a tool to shape them, you gain the ability to intervene intentionally in the feedback loops that govern emotion, attention, and perception. Focused attention is one of the most powerful tools you have for shaping the structure and function of your brain. When you deliberately direct your attention toward a specific thought, task, or sensory input, you are essentially telling your brain which neural pathways are important and should be strengthened. Attention acts as a spotlight, illuminating certain circuits while leaving others in relative darkness. This selective engagement enhances neuroplasticity because neurons that are activated together become more strongly connected. The more you practice focusing on specific ideas or tasks, the more efficient and automatic these circuits become, which in turn influences how you think, learn, and respond to your environment. The quality of attention matters as much as the quantity. Mindless repetition or distracted focus does not produce the same neural reinforcement as deliberate, sustained attention. When you fully engage with an idea, task, or experience, your brain releases neurotransmitters such as acetylcholine, which enhances signal clarity and strengthens the synapses of the engaged neurons. Dopamine is also released when attention is tied to meaningful or rewarding experiences, further reinforcing the circuits being used. This combination of focus and emotional relevance ensures that the pathways being activated are prioritized, making them more likely to be accessed in the future. Attention also plays a central role in learning and skill acquisition. Whether you are mastering a new language, practicing an instrument, or developing emotional regulation, the brain requires repeated, attentive engagement to create lasting change. Each session of focused practice lays down stronger neural connections, while lapses in attention prevent circuits from fully forming or being maintained. In this way, attention acts as both the architect and the builder of your thoughts, determining which mental patterns will grow stronger and which will fade. The mind is constantly bombarded with distractions, and these interruptions can weaken the development of desired thought patterns. By consciously practicing attention control, you train the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for executive function, planning, and self-regulation, to filter irrelevant stimuli and sustain engagement with meaningful input. This ability to focus also allows you to observe and interrupt unhelpful automatic thoughts, giving you the power to redirect your mental energy toward more constructive patterns. In other words, focused attention is not just about improving task performance, it is a tool for shaping the brain's architecture at the level of thought itself. Attention also interacts with memory formation. Focused attention enhances the encoding of experiences into long-term memory because the brain prioritizes the information that receives sustained cognitive resources. The circuits that are repeatedly activated during attentive engagement become more resilient and readily accessible, which is why habits, skills, and knowledge develop most effectively when paired with mindful concentration. Over time, this selective strengthening of neural pathways enables more efficient thinking, faster problem solving, and greater mental clarity. By harnessing focused attention, you are effectively guiding the brain's natural plasticity to build the patterns you want. It allows you to consciously choose which thoughts, skills, and habits are reinforced rather than being passively shaped by whatever stimuli happen to capture your awareness. Attention is the mechanism by which the brain decides what matters, and therefore, it is one of the most direct and controllable levers for shaping the mind. You are the architect of your mind, which means that the thoughts you experience and the patterns you habitually follow are not fixed, but the result of ongoing construction within your brain. Every decision, focus, and action you take contributes to shaping the neural architecture that underlies your mental life. Just as an architect designs a building by choosing where to place supports, walls, and spaces, you design your mental landscape through the repeated activation of certain thought patterns and the deliberate avoidance of others. This perspective shifts responsibility and power into your hands. The mind is not merely a passive observer of circumstances. It is a living structure you can shape with intention and practice. The process of shaping the mind begins with awareness. To build effectively, you must first understand the existing structure. Observing your habitual thoughts, emotional reactions, and cognitive tendencies provides a blueprint of the current mental architecture. These observations reveal which neural pathways are reinforced and which ones are underdeveloped or neglected. Awareness allows you to identify patterns that serve your goals and patterns that limit your potential. By noticing recurring thoughts or emotional triggers, you gain the ability to intervene, either by redirecting attention, reframing perspective, or engaging in new practices that promote desired outcomes. Once you are aware, intentional practice becomes the next step in constructing the mind. Thoughts like physical pathways are strengthened through repeated activation. Every time you choose to engage with a positive, constructive, or purposeful thought rather than defaulting to automatic reactions, you are laying down a stronger neural foundation. This is where habits and deliberate mental exercises intersect. Visualization, mindfulness, journaling, and focused problem solving all provide the structured repetition necessary to reinforce new circuits while gradually weakening old, unhelpful ones. The brain responds to consistent, intentional effort by reorganizing itself, demonstrating that change is always possible when you actively engage in the process. Emotion plays a critical role in the architectural process. The neural pathways most effectively reinforced are those tied to emotionally meaningful experiences. When you attach feeling, purpose, or significance to a thought or practice, you accelerate its incorporation into the brain's wiring. Positive emotional engagement signals to the brain that the pathway is valuable, while negative emotional feedback can either strengthen unhelpful patterns or, when managed consciously, create motivation to change. The integration of emotion, awareness, and repetition creates a powerful synergy that allows the mind to be shaped deliberately rather than left to the randomness of circumstance or habit. Being the architect of your mind also involves designing for adaptability. The brain is not static, and neither should your approach be. By cultivating curiosity, flexibility, and openness to new experiences, you maintain the capacity to revise your mental architecture as needed. Each experience, challenge, or insight provides an opportunity to remodel pathways, expand capabilities, and refine thought patterns. The deliberate construction of your mental landscape requires continuous attention, reflection, and engagement, emphasizing that mental growth is a lifelong process rather than a one-time achievement. Understanding that you are the architect of your mind shifts the perspective from limitation to possibility. It highlights the profound control you have over how you perceive, interpret, and respond to the world. Every choice you make, every habit you form, and every moment of attention you give to certain thoughts rather than others contributes to the ongoing construction of your mental architecture, giving you the capacity to create the mind you want to inhabit.